There's not a person I've met, Republican or Democrat, wealthy or struggling, that does not know that we've created a country now that compared to our industrial peers over the lifetime of a child, we're not stepping up. Other countries are leading us in investing in early childhood education, which we all know, before we start talking about first grade, second grade, third grade, the child's brain, we know there's studies of their brains, the most development is being done in those early years. And if they go into kindergarten, first grade, as we often see kids going in so far behind, it is very hard for them to catch up. And I'm a fiscal conservative, like I haven't met any, I live in Newark. I haven't met anybody in Newark that's not a fiscal conservative. They're not watching their dollars like hawks. And I now know that if you invest in early childhood development, we as a society as a whole get massive return in multiples. Now, we know that we used to be number one in that, now we're not, we're falling behind. All the way through to something else that you all know, which is the cost of college. We used to be the country that used to graduate the highest percentage of its people from college, any place else on the planet Earth. Now we've fallen out of the top 10. And when it comes to cost of college, think about this. In Germany, it's about 4% of median income to go to college. In Canada, it's about 6%. In England, about 6 to 7%. In America, it costs 52% of median income to go to college. And so these are the things that make me, when I talk with Hillary, she's so cognizant of and so passionate about changing these trends. Look, we just went through something else. We inherited from our grandparents. It's like inheriting this beautiful home from your grandparents, trashing it, and leaving a home all dilapidated to your children and say, hey, this is your inheritance. Well, that's what we did with our country's infrastructure. We had the number one infrastructure on the planet Earth. Now, depending on the national indices that you look at, we're number 12 to 18. Countries are literally blowing past us in the speed of their roads and their trains and even their aviation infrastructure. And it's crazy that this used to be a bipartisan way. Federal highway systems, thank Eisenhower. And now we have this country that is unwilling to invest in something that if we were running this like America Inc., like a company, we would be liable for shareholder lawsuits because we're not making the obvious investments that will grow our company, i.e. grow our economy. So I'm just a guy that when I talk to President, excuse me, I'm looking in the future here, when I talk to Secretary Clinton, and we get right down to business about talking about these issues, from health, access to healthy food, and this is what I love about her, is this is a time when everybody's trying to get the right soundbite that's going to make it in the news and resonate with pollsters and resonate with the popular, but think about what her early policy discussions have been about. Voter access, that doesn't poll well, but she knows that's a real issue. She's out there talking about something that I know people in this room know about, which is addiction. We have a nation that is facing astonishing rates of our folks being addicted to drugs. She sees it as the medical crisis it is. And then this is where I really want to drill down on. I'm proud that she has even mentioned my name in her early policies, things like apprenticeship programs. I'm just so happy that she understands that we have a fraction of the apprenticeship programs in our competitor nations. So, because everybody, I talked about college before, but we have an economy with millions of jobs that we can't fit people into because they don't have the right skill sets, so they're sitting vacant. And we need to look to countries like Germany and Canada because they've got robust apprenticeship programs. I walk around to manufacturers in New Jersey and say, what do you need? And I expect them to complain to me about this or that, but they say things like, we need a machinist. Can't find machinists. And so one of my first pieces of legislation, in fact, I did it with another African American. This should be embarrassing to say, but I'm the fourth elected African American in our country's history, and I did this piece of legislation with the fifth. I want to get to the point where we're not counting anymore, folks. Come on now. Well, we're not counting, okay? And we put in legislation. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. He's from South Carolina, from New Jersey. But we knew that we're falling behind with other countries. But this is really where I want to drill in, and then I'm going to go sit down with my two friends behind me. We're having a terrible view here. A large, expansive view. But this is really why, one of the reasons why Hillary's security won't let me close to her, because I want to hug her every time I see her. Because she stood up in her first policy speech when Baltimore was still smoking, and she spoke a truth about our criminal justice system that is just now starting to be realized by many people in America. What I said before about leading the globe, well, we don't lead anymore in education, but we lead this globe, the planet Earth, in incarceration. Now think about this. If anybody tries to tell you this is a black issue, please educate them for a second. Let me just explain to you what's happened in my lifetime, about 30, 40 years. We have gone from a country that had an incarceration rate on line with our peers to one that's exploded since 1980, the federal prison population up 800%. So we've gotten to the point now that we're only 5% of the globe's population, y'all, a little less than 5%. But we now have 1 out of every 4 incarcerated people on the planet is in America, around 25%.
Privatization.
We have, and I'm going to get to that, sir. Stop trying to jump ahead of me. I know you sit in the comedy clubs and say the punchlines before they get there. But what we have now is a nation that is so incarcerating its people. It's at levels that I've really never before seen in humanity. We now have been incarcerating so much that this is why we all who are fiscal conservatives in this room have to scratch our heads and think to ourselves, we spend $250 billion a year locking up human beings. We see our infrastructure crumbling, but we found somehow the wherewithal between 1990 and 2006 to build a new prison in the United States every 10 days. We now are wasting so much of our country's resources that is bleeding our taxpayer treasuries and making us divert investments from those places where we'll get a return on investments and drive it into the black hole of our prison system. But I'm not done yet. It's a prison system that feeds upon itself. The gentleman here, if you didn't hear him, he talked about private prisons, which is a part of the problem when you have the perverse economic incentive that you want to keep people more incarcerated. But this is the aspect of private prisons that bothers me, is that with all prisons, they call it the correctional system, but it doesn't correct.
That's right.
People come in with drug addictions, they don't get treatment. People come in with mental health challenges, they don't get medical attention. In fact, we do things in prison that other nations consider, I'm not using exaggeration, torture.
Yes.
We put our juveniles in solitary confinement.
Yes.
The medical community has a consensus about this. That it traumatizes kids, it hurts them. What do you do when you put a kid in for months in solitary confinement, traumatize them, hurt them? You all know the rule, hurt people do what? Hurt people. And so now we have a system that doesn't correct, doesn't do the things that we have evidence-based, data-based analyses show that if we invested in them, we would lower recidivism rates, then we push them back to the streets. Now this is something that I know this community I'm speaking to understands. We in our country, when a person has paid their debt for a nonviolent crime, for doing something the last 2 presidents admitted to doing. Okay? If I read their histories right, they admitted to felonies. Now they get back to the streets, nonviolent crime, and they face now what's called collateral consequences for the rest of their lives. You all know this. The American Bar Association identified 46,000 collateral consequences. What is it? You all know this. You come out, you can't find a job. Don't think you can get a job at McDonald's in Newark. If you have to check that box, you've been convicted. You can't get a Pell Grant, can't get a loan, go to school, educate yourself. Can't get many business licenses. Can't get loans from banks. You can't get food stamps. Can't get in public housing. And now, on top of it all, You're told you pay your debt to society, we won't even let you be a citizen.
That's right.
Equal citizenship rights. You're in a caste system. You can't serve on a jury. You can't vote. Let me stick there for a second, because all this talk about the 50th anniversary of voting rights, I don't like what states are doing, rolling back, but please understand, when you get in a conversation about voting rights, voter identification, all that I'm with you on, but please understand the real voting crisis in America is felony disenfranchisement. I want to back up with statistics. In 1976, I had a big afro. I looked good. I had hair. There was 1.7 million Americans who could not vote because of felony disenfranchisement. Because of the mass incarceration movement, now we are here, and we've got over 5.8 million people. If that was a state, it would be bigger than 30 states in America. And speaking of states, because of felony disenfranchisement, there are some states where 1 in 5 black men can't vote because they've been arrested for things. And so this system in and of itself is bad, but now let me take you to the final thing that Hillary is in hug jeopardy from me for talking about. Because it's enough to say all that, why the system is wrong, it's hurting us, it's expensive, it's actually causing more crime. Why? If I get out, W.B. Du Bois said this, there's nothing as dangerous as a man that thinks he has no hope. Can't get a job, can't get a loan, can't feed my family. What are they also end up doing? Going back to the corner. But this would all be bad enough, but this is what is the kicker. The system, this broken system of mass incarceration, is profoundly biased against poor people and minorities. That's what it hurts about it. It's not only broken in and of its right, but it treats different people differently. On the Supreme Court, it says etched there, equal justice under the law. Equal justice under law. But we now know that's not true. We have enough data to analyze. So let me give you some facts. There is no difference. I don't care what people are going to try to tell you. There is no difference between blacks and whites in drug usage or drug selling. In fact, some studies show that young white men sell drugs more. Now, I may or may not know about this, because when I was at Stanford, I may or may not have seen a whole lot of drugs used at Stanford. I couch it that way because some of y'all know my mama. And I know y'all are going to talk about me after you leave here. But nobody was raiding Stanford dorms. Stanford students do not get stopped and frisked on the way home. So we know that in certain communities, the drug war is being executed in a way that it's not. But then, even when a person gets arrested, we now have enough analysis to know that an African American, and by the way, Latinos as well. No difference with Latinos as well. Latino youth, God, if you're a young Latino man, by the time you are 23 years old, you have a 43% chance of being arrested. But now you get arrested for the same crime that somebody who's white gets arrested. Well, the data shows that if you're African American, you get about a 20% longer sentence. The data shows if you're African American, you're about 20% more likely to get the mandatory minimum. Because I say that, remember, some of you all need to stop watching the crime shows because it gives you this illusion that our criminal justice system is about juries and judges. It's not anymore. Did you all know that 98% of our criminal convictions in America are done by plea bargain? Which has put a tremendous amount of power into prosecutors, who can take and stack those mandatory minimums and say to a young kid, I mean that kid, 18, 19, 20 years old, and say, look, you're facing 15 years, 20 years. Cop to the assault's lower, I'll let you out. Who's not going to take that deal? But the kid doesn't realize once he takes that deal, now he can't get that Pell Grant, can't get that job, can't get that business license, can't get food stamps, all those things happen. And so this system that we know is broken, and now I'm telling you is biased, what does it result in? It results in us having a nation that has a greater black-white disparity in incarceration in America than existed in apartheid South Africa. A country that has more African Americans under criminal supervision, in jail, in prison, probation, parole, more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1850. That creates realities where in states 20% of the black men can't vote anymore because of felony disenfranchisement. Now, I say all that to let you know that this is the crisis of our times. And if you profess to favor freedom, yet deprecate agitation, you're like wanting the crops without the tilling of the soil, the water without the ocean's roar, the rain without the thunder and lightning. This is Frederick Douglass's quote. That those of us that want a nation that lives up to its highest ideals must be willing to make sacrifices for it. Because the cost of this country, of this broken system, is profound. A study came out that showed if we had incarceration rates in America the same as our global peers, we would have, this is the most punishing data point for me, we would have 20% less poverty in America. Because we now know, we can measure what the lost earnings are, what happens to a woman that's incarcerated who has dependent children, what happens to those kids? And so, for me, the urgency is great, but the question is, those of us who profess to favor freedom, what will we do about this? And I'll tell you this, my parents had this, as a boy growing up, my father would look at me walking around my house. When I was a teenager, I promise you, you cannot find a teenager who had more teenage swagger than me. I thought I was something special. High school All-American football player, I used to walk around my house, and my dad would look at me walking around and say, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple, because you were born on third base. They remind me that we drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that we did not dig. We eat lavishly from banquet tables prepared for us by our ancestors who sit under the shade of trees planted by other hands. And so I end with this call to my friends in this room. We are brothers and sisters, white, black, Latino, in the cause of our country, and our ideals are being violated. Our history is being insulted. We are not the country that we can be, should be, must be. We haven't honored that greatest generation who fought wars, civil rights movements, battled depression, and gave to us a nation of promise and hope. Our generation now taking this baton have an obligation. And so I'm going to end with this story, this simple story from my father. Now look, my mom and my dad are special human beings. And as a young man in my 40s now, I love hearing my parents tell stories, because even though they tell me the same stories over and over and over again, and I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, I love listening to my mom tell those stories because she has this penchant for accuracy and detail. I learn something every time she talks about some little point, little fact, I learn it. And I love hearing my dad tell stories because he used to tell stories, he had this penchant for hyperbole and exaggeration. So every time he tells a story, it gets more exciting than the last time he told the story. And my dad has this one story that I want to end with, and I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with my two friends. And this is really the call I ask for you. And I know you, by the fact that you're here on this beautiful weekend, I know you all feel this already. Don't need me to tell you the story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So my parents do to me. So my dad tells this story, it's got to be apocryphal, about these kids sitting in a classroom. And he's sitting in the back of class, and his teacher walks in. He said the teacher didn't last that long. First day of school, she stands before the kids, and she goes, class, I want to teach y'all about self-esteem. Anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid, I want you to stand up right now. And nobody moved. And the woman stands there getting a little frustrated, a little annoyed. She goes, come on now. I want to teach y'all about self-esteem. You think you're dumb, think you're stupid, stand up. She just waited so she could talk to one of the kids. So nobody moved. My dad said he looked around, and finally he just pushed his chair back and stood up proudly. And the teacher looked at my father and said, Mr. Booker, boy, what's wrong with you? You think you're dumb? You think you're stupid? And my father just scratched his head and said, well, shucks, ma'am, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing. Ladies and gentlemen, I say this to you with my heart. People stood for us. They fought for us. They sweat for us. They bled for us. They scrubbed toilets for us. We got to stand up. We got to stand up because we know what our ancestors said. King said change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It must be carried in on the backs of people willing to stand up for it. We know what Frederick Douglass said. In life you don't get everything you pay for, but you must pay for everything that you get. We got to stand up. And we may not be called to stand in marches against people with billy clubs and tear gas. We may not be called to stand up on beaches of Normandy. We may not be called to stand and sit in the backs of buses doing freedom rides, but our generation is called to the same level of courage and consistency and conviction that our previous ancestors were. And if we are to prove worthy of our inheritance, it's time for us to stand up and engage and activate and inform and take the destiny of this country into our own hands, because it is our responsibility, and direct the course of this country so it does become a nation of liberty and justice for all. Thank you.